And we're live. JLR Investigates. Come on in, come on in. Big news out of New York City. The Trump DOJ is demanding the Southern District of New York to drop all federal charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. This is big, folks. Come on in, come on in, come on in. As some of you might or might not know, Eric Adams has an indictment against him by the federal government. The Southern District of New York, one of the most prestigious federal districts in the country. You don't want to mess with the Southern District of New York, folks. They've prosecuted everyone from mob bosses to corruption, terrorists, drug kingpins. A lot of bad people have been prosecuted out of the Southern District of New York. And a lot of people that also, you know, some people think shouldn't have been prosecuted. Some people prosecuted. So the Southern District of New York, though, they prosecute. And we're talking about Eric Adams. As mayor of New York, he has taken the forefront, particularly in the issue when it comes to migrants and mass deportations. We're going to throw Adams' photo up on the right because we're going to talk about this because he's going to speak here soon. This is wild. This is unprecedented, folks, because as you all know, Donald Trump is now the president of the United States, and Trump is, you know, he has his DOJ, his Department of Justice, and, you know, Pam Bondi is the Attorney General, but you have an acting Deputy Attorney General out of Washington. It's like Trump's right-hand man. His name is Emil Bove, B-O-V-E. And he sent a letter to the Southern District of New York demanding that all charges against Eric Adams be dropped. Wow. This is big because Eric Adams, you know, if he would have been convicted, which the Southern District of New York almost has a 99.9% conviction rate. This guy right here that you see right here, he is the acting Attorney General, and he's the one that sent the letter to the Southern District of New York. By the way, the Southern District of New York has a new prosecutor themselves. They have a new prosecutor themselves. The previous prosecutor who was appointed by Biden, his name was Damian Williams. He resigned right before Trump took office. So Biden appointed this guy named Damian Williams right here. This is Damian Williams. And he was the prosecutor that prosecuted Adams. He was appointed by Biden. As some of you might or might not know, when a new incoming president comes in, usually the acting or the U.S. attorneys for each district, they usually resign. The next person, the next president usually wants to put in their own U.S. attorneys for their own judicial philosophy. So Damian Williams, he's no longer there. He's right there. He's the one that was prosecuting Eric Adams. He prosecuted Eric Adams, but now he left. You got a new prosecutor in there, a female. Her name is Danielle Sassoon. Danielle Sassoon. She comes from the Federalist Society. She actually law clerk. I was reading a little bit about her. She actually was a law clerk for Antoine Scalia. Scalia, remember one of the justices that suddenly died? She law clerked for him. So she's in play now. Now she is the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. So her office right here receives a letter from the Trump DOJ. And in this letter, we will share, it says, basically, we're demanding you are directed, that's the words, you are directed to dismiss the pending charges against United States versus Adams. It's crazy because I've never seen anything like this where at Washington, D.C., Attorney General's office, the DOJ, the head honcho, sends a letter out to the U.S. Attorney's office demanding a case get dropped. You know, and I'm going to bring Magnolia in the chat shortly. Well, we were talking about, we might have kind of jumped the cart when we were talking about Trump pardoning Adams, which we suspected that was happening due to the fact that Adams has been down there at Mar-a-Lago, around the time the election was, a little bit afterward, he, had conversations with Trump. We figured a pardon was coming. But I didn't think possibly the scenario where his case just gets dismissed right out, where Trump doesn't even have to give him a pardon because his case gets dismissed. And lo and behold, that's what's going on right now. His case is going to be dismissed. Now, it's subject to the judge. It has to go in front of the judge. Now, this will be interesting because the judge, I'll throw him up there. His name is Dale Ho. H-O. Dale Ho. And Dale Ho is the presiding judge, the U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of New York. Dale Ho was appointed by Biden. So it will be interesting to see if the judge agrees with this. But I think the judge basically has no choice. This is Dale Ho right here. He is the presiding judge, the federal judge. Ultimately, the say comes, with the judge. But pretty much the judge is going to have to approve it, because if the prosecution doesn't want to proceed with the case, how can a judge deny that prosecution's request to dismiss it? Why would a judge do that? Because you don't have a prosecutor prosecuting a case. Wow. Now, Adams is going to talk at the top of the hour. In the meantime, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is going on with this, because Adams himself is he's running for re-election. He's running for re-election. There's some people that are running against him, but now, he has a full speed ahead if he gets these charges dropped, because, he doesn't have these charges or potentially going to prison over his head, Eric Adams. So he's running for re-election, and it seems like he's made it perfectly clear, Adams, that he will be cooperating with the Trump administration when it comes to the mass deportations. So it will be interesting. I want to play first this clip on what are the news talking about this. Before Adams comes up, we're going to actually play a couple news clips sharing with what I'm talking about here, sharing about the situation. So we're going to listen to Fox 5 New York, and we are going to listen, or I'm sorry, NBC New York. Justice Department orders all corruption charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams dismissed. So,
the Justice Department ordering the dismissal of the corruption case against Mayor Eric Adams. The stunning order in an email to federal prosecutors likely brings an end to a 3-year-long federal corruption investigation. This, as the Trump administration also seeks help from the mayor with its immigration crackdown. Chief Investigative Reporter Jonathan Deeks kicks off tonight's team coverage. John?
David, the Justice Department today ordered all federal criminal charges dropped against Mayor Adams, and any review to consider charges in the future won't happen until after the mayoral election in November. The Justice Department memo says Mayor Adams should not be put on trial for corruption-related charges. The memo, authorized by Trump's new Attorney General Pam Bondi and written by Acting Attorney General Emil Bove, tells prosecutors in the Southern District, you are directed to dismiss the pending charges in U.S. v. Adams as soon as is practicable. The memo says the decision to drop the case has nothing to do with the strength of the evidence or the legal theories. Instead, the memo criticizes the timing of the charges brought months before the primary. And second, the memo claims the charges restrict Mayor Adams' ability to help address illegal immigration and crime issues, problems Team Trump blames on the Biden administration. A spokesman for the acting U.S. attorney in the Southern District declined to comment on when line prosecutors will inform the judge they're dropping the case.
There's no legal problem with this memo because DOJ can charge whomever they want, and they can decide to no longer charge whomever they want. But from a public relations perspective, this memo is going to be a huge problem for this administration.
The memo states prosecutors are not offering to exchange dismissal of a criminal case for Adams' assistance on immigration enforcement.
It protests a little too much their reasons for dropping this prosecution.
Adams was charged with taking free trips from Turkey. And as frontrunner in the mayor's race, he allegedly pressed the fire department to give safety approval to a new Turkish consulate building, despite problems there. At the Al Smith dinner in October, then candidate Trump spoke out.
I was persecuted, and so are you, Eric.
Adams and his defense team had been seeking dismissal from Trump's Justice Department. In a statement, Adams' lawyer said the charges were misguided, that the mayor never used his official position for personal benefit. With the federal case set to be dismissed, one law enforcement source says a state prosecution by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg is most unlikely because that office is not privy to any of the evidence. Natalie?
Chief Investigative Reporter Jonathan Dienst, and we do have team coverage tonight. That DOJ order comes in the midst of Adams' re-election campaign, as John mentioned. Tonight, Government Affairs reporter Melissa Russo continues this team coverage with the reaction from his political rivals. Melissa.
Strong reaction, Natalie. And, you know, just taking a step back, it might sound like a good thing for Mayor Adams, right? Charges being dismissed, no more trial in April. Maybe he catches a break heading into the June Democratic primary. But could the backlash from this deal with the DOJ be worse for the mayor than a criminal trial or even a potential conviction?
I know I am innocent. I will request in immediate trials so the New Yorkers can hear the truth.
That was back in September when Mayor Eric Adams was first facing indictment. But now New Yorkers likely won't hear the truth or the evidence before they head to the polls to vote in the mayor's race.
Corruption. Corruption is the name of the game with Eric Adams.
The mayor's challengers tonight ripping into him.
This should outrage every single New Yorker.
Implying the directive to drop the charges is more corrupt than the bribery and campaign finance crimes Mayor Adams was accused of to begin with.
What's so criminal to me is that he has clearly sold New Yorkers out in order to save himself.
Being upgraded in an airplane many years ago, I think that he was treated pretty unfairly.
Some New Yorkers say they've been suspicious of the mayor's deepening ties to Donald Trump.
I think that he would befriend Trump, and that doesn't give a lot of me or my neighbors a good feeling. I don't think it gives a lot of us a good feeling.
Especially as Adams has advised city workers as recently as today not to obstruct immigration enforcement and not to criticize the president, saying it could cost the city billions in federal dollars.
Instead of protecting New Yorkers, Eric Adams is protecting exactly one New Yorker, himself, and we all deserve better.
The Justice Department is not saying the mayor is innocent, nor that the charges are unfounded. The fact that this plan would allow charges against Mayor Adams to be revived at a later date, perhaps after the election, means that Adams could continue to owe Trump in the meantime.
Donald Trump is transactional and only does things usually if he's getting something for it.
The mayor's lawyer said the developments from DOJ prove that the mayor is innocent. But again, that's not what the Justice Department said. There are remaining questions about how much pushback we might see from prosecutors. And the mayor's poll numbers, it's important to note, were low even before he was charged in this case. So his political future at this point still uncertain despite these developments. Natalie?
Okay.
All right. Got the wonderful Magnolia in the chat. She was here earlier. I didn't see her. Hello, Magnolia.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning. So, Eric Adams, let's throw his photo up on the right, Magnolia, so people can see. This is big. What is your immediate take on this? Let's have a discussion about the mayor.
Yeah, it was what you were saying before. You know, everyone's been going around saying, oh, he's just trying to get a pardon from Trump. You know, people have been actually saying that pretty much ever since the case was brought against him in the first place. When he would come out and do these, every Tuesday or whatever, they do these things with the press. They invite the press to come in and they speak and answer questions and things. And, he's been saying these things about cooperating with ICE. He met with Tom Homan. He was seen going to Mar-a-Lago. He was seen shaking hands with Trump at one of the fights that we saw right after Trump won, I think. And a lot of people were going on and on and on and like, oh, he's just trying to get a pardon. He's only saying these things because he wants a pardon. You know, but we know that he actually believes the things he's saying, because we've been covering him extensively for about a year and a half. We've been covering all the things that he said and done during the migrant crisis. And he has constantly, nonstop complained about the sanctuary city policies. He has not been able to get the city council on board. He is basically at odds with a hostile city council who flat out refuses to get rid of the de Blasio sanctuary policies. And that's been an ongoing thing with his administration. It's just been this constant battle. But yeah, it turns out he really didn't need a pardon at all. And it kind of makes sense, because if you know about the case, if you actually read the indictment and you go through some of the things that they accused him of, it's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous case that they brought against him. Specifically, they claim that he took favors from the Turkish government in the form of flight upgrades, and that he also showed them favoritism by helping them get their consulate opened up in New York, which is his job. The Turkish government, other countries have space in New York City for their consulates and things like that. And the Turkish government wanted to use theirs. However, it needed to be inspected and approved by the fire department. So Adams asked the fire department, can you go ahead and inspect this building and make sure it's up to code, because the Turkish government wants to use their building. This is what he was indicted for. They claimed that he was showing favoritism and different things like that, and corruption and taking favors and things. But, you know, if you really read the charges, it's nonsense. No one's ever charged for things like this. It's completely ridiculous. So, you know, the charges were flimsy, but the government that brought the case against him seemed determined to take him out. And what the Trump DOJ is saying is that they believe the charges in the first place, the case itself, was essentially a form of election interference by the Biden DOJ. That is how they look at this, that it was an effort to take him out because he spoke out against the Biden administration repeatedly last year on the way to DC one time to meet with Biden. He was on his 10th trip. He was on the plane on the way there when some of his staffers were raided. And so the Trump DOJ looks at this as entirely politically motivated, a misuse of the justice system, a weaponization of the justice system. And they point to Donald Trump's executive order and also the memo by Pam Bondi, which they stated their goal is to end the weaponization of the Justice Department. And so they're pointing to all those factors as why they believe this case needs to be dismissed.
Yeah. And this hardly ever happens. I was trying to find cases anywhere where Washington DOJ contacts a district, a federal district, and demands or directs prosecutors to flat out drop a case, because there was prosecutors and, you know, officials in the Southern District of New York that investigated this guy, Adams. And, you know, was it a witch hunt, or was he legitimately doing, you know, corruption with the Turkish government? I personally think the Biden DOJ was reaching on him, and I personally think they just, you know, wanted to shut him up, get him out of the mix because he's not playing ball with you know, the Biden administration's philosophy about, I think, sanctuary cities. I think the whole migrant issue, you know, with the mayor here not playing ball with that team Biden with this whole thing and calling it out, and I think they retaliated on him. And I do think it's weaponization of the DOJ against Adams. My opinion. He could have maybe done some favoritism, but who doesn't do that when they're in those positions? Who doesn't do that? But is it enough to get indicted for and get all these frauds and briberies? I mean, he got upgrade on a Turkish flight, and that's what they're using as far as fraud wise. Like, come on.
Right. Yeah. It's just, well, I think the thing about it is that it was just so obvious that it was, you know, they were basically just going after him because he was making the Biden administration look bad, which they didn't really need a whole lot of help with that. But, you know, most people in the country were horrified by what they were seeing with the migrant crisis and these, especially the criminal illegals coming in, the revolving door in the jails. They're just constantly coming out, you know, so the way this was done, it was so obviously, RK said the right word, retaliation. You know, because the Biden administration, I don't know if people remember this, but initially when the migrant crisis kicked off, in the beginning, the media and the Biden administration repeatedly said there was no migrant crisis. You're just seeing things. Everything's fine. There's no migrant crisis, right? They were going on the news every day saying that. Mayorkas was saying it. There's no migrant crisis. Everything's great. We don't have any more migrants coming in than we typically have. This is fine. It's normal. This is what they were saying for like the first year or two. In 2022 is really when it started to impact New York significantly. And in the beginning, they were just constantly trying to downplay it. And then here comes Eric Adams, and he's like, this is a crisis. This is a migrant crisis. The border is wide open and and they're sending these people and they're not giving us money to help. And, you know, so he just started really like speaking out very, very loudly when the the Biden administration was trying to do all this stuff like covertly, and they were trying to downplay it, and he was not playing along. So the way they did it just seemed super obvious. Also, the reason you're not finding any precedent here is because this situation is literally unprecedented. There has never been a sitting mayor of New York City indicted before. This has never happened. So that's why you're having trouble finding any type of precedent for the case being dropped, because there's never been a case brought against an acting New York City mayor. The other thing the Trump administration pointed to, in addition to their belief that this is election interference, they're also saying that they feel Eric Adams is critical to the Trump administration goals and objectives when it comes to stemming the migrant crisis and the deportations. They believe he will be a key figure in helping them achieve those goals. So if he's facing an indictment, he's going through all this stuff publicly, they believe that that will hinder him from being able to help in the way that they believe he will. So that was the other thing that they pointed to in the letter.
Yeah, different media outlets have now, you know, the three major news networks, Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, have different takes on this situation here. We compiled a few clips of these media outlets talking about, you know, this case getting dismissed. You know, one media outlet will say, you know, will Southern District of New York prosecutors resign or quit in protest because they can't go through with getting this case dropped, you know? And then other ones are saying, will the judge defy what the prosecutors are asking for and say, no, you got to prosecute this case? And, you know, we want to hear different perspectives. It just depends on who you like watching when it comes to media, but we want to put out different perspectives on this. Let's play Fox News talking about their take on this right here.
Back here to live now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us here. Let's get into more of these top stories, one of which we previewed for you before the break. Let's take this live picture there in New York City. And we have some major breaking news to report coming from Fox News Digital. And this was first reported exclusively to Fox. David Spunt there at the Justice Department. Reporting now that the DOJ is moving to dismiss federal charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And so this is pretty significant. We've been covering this story for a very long time. And I just want to put this up from Adams's attorney here, a statement from Alex Spiro saying this, quote, "As I said from the outset, the mayor is innocent and he would prevail. Today, the Department of Justice has reevaluated this case and determined it should not go forward. There's a good reason for that. The facts of the case are clear. The mayor never used his official position for personal benefit, nor did he have any role in violating campaign finance laws. Despite a lot of fanfare and sensational claims, ultimately, there was no evidence presented that he broke any laws ever. The witnesses that were promised never materialized. The additional charges that were threatened never came. Now, thankfully, the mayor and New York can put this unfortunate and misguided prosecution behind them here." So that is a statement from Adams's attorney there, Alex Spiro, a very high-powered criminal defense attorney. So just reading a little bit more, this is coming in a letter from the acting Deputy Attorney General, his name Emil Bove. He sent a letter to the acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, instructing them to drop the federal case against Adams and this is important, to dismiss it without prejudice here. Now, obviously, because we are in just week 4 of the Trump administration 2.0, that is why a lot of these positions and jobs have the word acting in front of them here. Now, remember, previous U.S. District Attorney for the Southern District of New York, remember, his name was Damian Williams. He brought this case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. But now the DOJ sending this letter to the SDNY, urging them to dismiss the case without prejudice here. Remember, Adams was indicted in September on charges that included bribery, soliciting campaign contributions from foreign nationals, remember, the Turkey connection, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Remember, he pleaded not guilty to all of those charges. Now, Fox obtained the memo that Bove penned to the acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. That memo was titled, quote, "Dismissal without prejudice of the prosecution of Mayor Eric Adams." The memo cites President Trump's executive orders regarding combating the weaponization of law enforcement and federal immigration policy. So this is quite something here. Bove instructing the district there to drop the federal case against Adams, and it will be reviewed and reconfirmed by the Southern District of New York after the November 2025 election. Now, remember, Adams is up for re-election later this year. There have already been those in his own party and some to his left that are weighing primary challenges against Adams in the Democratic mayoral primary. I believe that's going to be held in June of this year. The general is in November of this year. So it is safe to say, of course, that when the indictment was handed down and these charges brought, Adams was fighting for his political life. And now he could get a huge reprieve in an election year for him. Now, according to David Spunt, DOJ top brass believes the case needs to be dropped so that Adams can continue efforts to stop illegal immigration. So that's an interesting illegal immigration angle there. But according to officials, to David Spunt, no quid pro quo is going on, but it is believed that at DOJ that the federal case hamstrung his abilities, Adams' abilities, and took his focus away from his duties as mayor. So I want to put up this tweet here from Fox 5 New York reporter Morgan McKay, our colleague there. The mayor saying right now he doesn't have any information and will be speaking to his attorney after news broke that the DOJ is requesting the SDNY to drop those charges here. Now, interestingly enough, our colleague there, Fox News correspondent, Lauren Green, did catch up with Mayor Adams tonight for his reaction. We have that sound. Let's play that.
We were just notified of the possibility that DOJ has communicated with the local U.S. Attorney's office here, and we're going to find out more information. I don't have much now. I'm just sitting down now with John Catsimatidis, and I'm going to reach out to my attorney. I don't have much more information. Yeah.
Your initial reaction is what?
Well, I think that I would like to speak with him first and get a better understanding of exactly what's taking place now, because right now I don't have any information. As I'm sitting here, calls are coming through, but we're looking to find out what's going on.
Okay, great. Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so as a journalist, sometimes you want to be in the right place at the right time, and it seemed like Lauren Green was there. Adams out there to dinner in New York City, back out there live to the Big Apple. Now, remember, Adams met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago before his inauguration last month. Adams suggested in December that he was charged after speaking out against the Biden administration's immigration policies. Remember, he had that exclusive sit-down interview with Fox's Martha McCallum in December. Adams said, quote, "I did not break the law." He said, "I did nothing wrong. That is how I live my life here." Now, the move to dismiss the charges also comes after Attorney General Pam Bondi just last week established the weaponization working group within the DOJ that will review the activities of all law enforcement agencies over the past 4 years to identify instances of politicized justice. And remember, Adams has maintained all along, both implicitly and explicitly, that this was the weaponization of the Justice Department against him. And so now we're going to have to wait and see when this becomes official. We'll be all over that story when that comes to pass.
All right. So Magnolia, a lot of things that were being said there that we've already discussed, but that was in the Fox News perspective. They actually had a reporter that rolled up on Mayor Adams last night. He was at a restaurant. He said he wasn't aware. Alex Sparrow is his lawyer. For some of you do not know, let's put Adam's photo back on the right. For some of you that do not know, his attorney, Alex Sparrow, was the one that got Alec Baldwin's case dismissed in the middle of trial.
Yeah, well, before the trial even got underway. I mean, it was shocking, stunning. But yeah, that's when a lot of us he kind of came on our radar, and then next thing we knew, he was representing Mayor Adams. And Alex Sparrow, he likes to do these press conferences about his client's innocence, and he does the charts and different things like that. And he did one about Eric Adams, kind of went through the different charges. So I wonder if he'll actually be with Eric Adams this morning or at noon when he does the presser today.
Yeah, could be. He could be there. Also, Sparrow, I like to hear him speak. Sparrow represents Jay-Z too. Jay-Z is involved with those with the P. Diddy parties type of deals. Jay-Z's being sued. Sparrow's representing him. I'm looking at Sparrow. He also represented Elon Musk in a defamation suit. He's also represented Aaron Hernandez, they say. He's part of that legal team when he was charged with one of the murders in the Boston area. So Sparrow, his lawyer, gets around, and people are saying he's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Sparrow didn't have to end up defending him when it comes to a trial, because there is no trial when it comes to this case. It's getting dismissed. Now, it could stall a little bit maybe because of the judge. Again, we were talking about the judge, Dale Ho. He's the federal judge. appointed by Biden, but I just can't see how this would just not get dismissed. CNN's talking about it. Oh, CNN. CNN is talking about this case. It's here's CNN's perspective on the mayor's case possibly getting dismissed.
The breaking news, President Trump's Justice Department moving to drop the federal corruption case against the New York City Mayor Eric Adams. This is according to a memo which we've just obtained here at CNN. It reads in part, quote, the Justice Department has reached this conclusion without assessing the strength of the evidence or the legal theories on which the case is based. The charges against the Democrat were brought by then President Biden's Justice Department last year, marking the first prosecution of a sitting mayor in the modern history of New York City. All right, let's go straight to Paula Reed. Paula, it's pretty stunning here what they're saying. They reached this conclusion without assessing the strength of the evidence or the legal theories on which the case is based. That's just a sort of, makes you stop in your tracks for a second. It does come after Adams attended the president's inauguration. He met with Trump at his Florida golf course. What more can you tell us about this decision by Trump's Justice Department?
Yeah, I want to get into the language in the memo, but I will say this is not much of a surprise because Trump has said publicly that he would be open to pardoning Adams. He's tried to really kind of downplay the significance of the charges that were filed against him. And as you just noted, the two have been seen in social settings multiple times. Yep. So we knew something like this was in the works, even though this is not a pardon, it's a dismissal. But what's fascinating is how much they packed into this two-page memo, including, you said they didn't assess the facts, but they were also really careful here not to throw stones at the career prosecutors, because as we know, there is a firestorm at DOJ and the FBI right now, concerns that the Trump administration is trying to purge the agency of career prosecutors. They say this in no way calls into question the integrity and the efforts of line prosecutors responsible for the case. That is definitely a deliberate inclusion there. Then they pivot to echoing what Adams has said. He has argued that he was only charged because he criticized the Biden administration's immigration policy. Right. And they lay that out and say the reason that they want to dismiss this case is so that Adams can apply more energy towards immigration enforcement. They say, quote, accomplishing the immigration objectives established by President Trump and the Attorney General is every bit as important, if not more so, as the objectives that the prior administration pursued. So on its face, I mean, this could look like kind of a quid pro quo. You help us with immigration, we'll get rid of that pesky case. In a footnote in this memo, they note that the acting deputy attorney general clearly stated to defense counsel during their meeting that the government is not offering to exchange a dismissal of a criminal case for Adams' assistance on immigration enforcement. So they are clearly aware of this. A source familiar with their thinking insists this is not a quid pro quo, but clearly President Trump has earned himself an ally in New York City.
So, Jeff, is this surprising?
This is one of the most bizarre situations I have ever seen. I mean, here this guy is indicted, and by a very respected office. He makes complaints that he was politically targeted.
Right. He says because he complained about immigration under the Biden administration, he was targeted.
Which there is absolutely no evidence of. And the Justice Department now, under the new Trump administration, dismisses the case against him, but says, well, we don't know whether he's guilty or not, but we want him to fight crime. I mean, this is what happens in authoritarian countries.
They essentially were saying that fighting these charges takes away from his ability to help the Trump administration with immigration.
Correct. And this is what happens in authoritarian countries, that the rule of law is not applied equally. It's only applied to how the leader wants it applied. And Eric Adams has ingratiated himself with the Trump administration, and now he gets his case
He went to
dismissed.
Mar-a-Lago. He went down to the inauguration.
Right. And that's not how the legal system's supposed to work. Especially when the Justice Department acknowledges that the case may well be legitimate.
And Jessica, I mean, how weird is it to have a directive from the leadership of the Department of Justice?
It's extremely unusual to have the leadership of the Department of Justice reach out to a U.S. Attorney's office and tell them at this stage
to drop a case. There may be consultation before a case is brought, but once it's been brought, it's generally left to the prosecutors who are handling the case to see it through its duration. So it's highly unusual. And as Jeff said, particularly because of what's set forth in this highly unusual memo, which essentially says we're not taking any opinion on the merits of the case or the legal theories. That's not why we're directing you to drop the charges. It's because we want Mayor Adams to be able to pursue the president's immigration policies unfettered by worrying about this prosecution, and also because we think that the prosecution itself was in some ways politically tainted when it was brought from the outset. But the document reads as a very political document. There's a citation and a footnote to something that President Biden did, exchanging Victor Bout with somebody else who had been prosecuted by the Southern District of New York, who was released in a prisoner exchange under President Biden. So there's a sense in which there's this sort of like laying out old political concerns with respect to the prior administration in a document that's supposed to be about the case of Eric Adams.
John Miller, as somebody who knows the history of New York, how weird is this in the history of New York?
Well, first of all, it's so shocking that there is literally nobody who didn't expect exactly this to happen. And we shouldn't pretend. In fact, I think you and I sat here in December and went through the theory of what was coming, which came, which is that the Justice Department would probably move to dismiss it rather than pardon it based on the strength of the case, which they actually don't address in the memo. Instead, they say it interfered with the mayor's ability to run the city. It makes reference to weaponization of government. Which
right. It says it cannot be ignored that Mayor Adams criticized the prior administration's immigration policies before the charges were filed.
Right. And it cryptically talks about, the recent actions of the former U.S. Attorney, Damian Williams, who brought the case, which is code for he's created a website that, for all intents and purposes, has the appearances of being some kind of early stage of a campaign website. And they're accusing him of using this case to kind of jumpstart his career in politics, but again, only between the lines. So, as has already been stated here, the memo, which is usually Justice Department memos, are dry, legal, and declarative. It's dripping with politics, and it is as it appears. Now, there are legitimate arguments about the strength of the case, the lack of a quid pro quo for the alleged bribe, which is the top count, and the timing of the case. But it sure is different.
But there's a way to challenge a court case, which is to go to court and tell the judge to dismiss the case.
A motion was made by the defense, which was a very compelling motion.
It was a very good motion.
And it was dismissed by the judge. So for the prosecutor to be directed, basically to go make a motion against their interest is really strange. And remember, it's coming from Emil Bove. This is the same individual who is the acting Deputy Attorney General, who comes right from the very same office that brought this case, but who was Donald Trump's criminal lawyer in some of these matters.
Jessica, could charges be brought at the state level?
I'd have to think about what those would look like. I mean, these are charges that were brought under federal statutes based on a federal statute that governs bribery when somebody is working for. If it's particular to people, to organizations and cities that receive a certain amount of federal funds. It's a wire fraud statute. So we'd have to look and see what state theories might be available.
Seems unlikely.
Yeah.
Very. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, CNN's perspective of the situation. But they, Jeffrey Toobin, they bring Jeffrey Toobin. Toobin's the one that got caught exposing himself years back. Right?
Yeah.
Well, Toobin's like, this is crazy. I mean, but it's good to hear from their, John Miller there, Toobin, to hear their perspective, because, they talk a lot about New York cases over the years and everything. They just said they've never seen anything like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're sitting there going on and on about, they're calling the Trump DOJ letter, quote, political. They kept saying over and over, this letter is so political. But at the same time, they refuse to acknowledge the most obvious fact of all, which is the entire case against Eric Adams was political in the first place. So, I just think that's amusing that they want to label this letter as political, but not acknowledge reality that everyone knows.
Here, I'm gonna put Adam's photo in the right corner. Here's the thing: they're acting like, oh yeah, well, why don't Adams just, his attorneys just file motions to dismiss and go through that process? Well, they've done that, and all the attorneys usually, when cases proceed to trial, are going to try to get the case dismissed by filing motions, and literally 100% of the time, judge is going to deny that. They're not going to just dismiss it outright like that from a defense motion. So, the federal government anyway has most cases in the federal government get resolved 94% of the time, and they have a 98% conviction rate, more or less. It's rubber stamped. The odds are significantly in favor of prosecution when it comes to federal cases. He had no chance. He would have been convicted. He'd have been convicted.
Well, yeah, and the thing about this that I don't think people realized, when Eric Adams did the interview with Tucker Carlson, Tucker asked him, are you worried about the charges and going to jail and things like that? And Eric said what they charged him with was up to 20 years in prison, which is madness. When you're talking about what he was flying to Turkey and he had a coach ticket and they bumped him up to first class, that's a reason to charge someone that could land him in prison for 20 years. The whole thing was just so outrageous.
Well, most of the federal statutes, most of them anyway, have these maximum 20 years, 30 years. I think what Adams was charged with, he was charged with mail fraud, correct? Fraud and bribery. And the maximum charges are 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wire fraud, it's 30 years. Certain RICOs, drugs, minimum mandatories, it's the tough federal sentencing guidelines. So, he had 20 years over his head here.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how significant that was. The amount of time he was facing was just crazy. It wasn't like, he was just going to get a campaign finance fine or something like that and go on about his business. If he had gotten convicted for this, he could have gone away for decades.
Hey, well, I said last night my take on it. He probably would have went to prison for about 2.5 years. 2 to 4 years in that range. I don't think he would have got more than 5 years for it, though. Let's look at the pardon that just happened yesterday with Blagojevich, former governor of Illinois. He had a 14-year sentence for trying to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat. 14 years. He served 8.
Well, and I actually think that Eric would have gotten a similar sentence along those lines, which is just unbelievable considering what they're saying he did.
Remember, Menendez just got a bunch of time, right? Former senator of New Jersey, 11 years.
Oh, mm-hmm.
11 years. I mean, some of these people here do get a lot of time. So Adams had this over his head, and we knew that Trump was going to intervene in here some way, somehow. Whether it was a pardon, I didn't think it was going this route. I did not have this on my bingo card here. This is the way, but this might be the new future too. When it comes to cases, the DOJ from Washington might overlook the entire, all the other federal districts and the AUSAs and attorney generals in each particular district, and then have oversight and basically direct certain places to either prosecute or not prosecute. This could set precedent here in the future and fundamentally shift and change the dynamics of how this whole process works. I will add that, my own experience in the federal system, myself, I could say 99% of the time, the prosecutors run the show. Whatever the prosecutors ask for, judges, whether they're reluctant to agree, they end up agreeing. Basically, is whatever the prosecutors present to the judge will do whatever the prosecutors ask for. Whether it's see please or please, very rarely will a judge go against what the prosecutors asked for. Prosecutors will sometimes ask for a lot of time. Maybe the judges will go a little bit downward departure on people's sentencing, but overall, what the prosecutors ask for, judges will comply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think what you were saying about the future and how things will be going forward. Well, the Trump DOJ has made clear that their goal is to end weaponization of lawfare. That is their goal, and this is pretty much like the poster child for that goal. So what they're saying is, these cases that are being brought against especially public officials, elected officials, they believe that this was retaliation. Trump equates it to his own situation. That's a big part of this because Trump feels that they weaponized the justice system against him as well. And so he sees a lot of similarities in his situation with Adam's situation and just different things we've seen over the last several years. They want to basically bring things back to actual justice. They want the Department of Justice to basically fix their image, right some wrongs that have been done over the past few years, and they want to get back to where the American people actually have faith in the justice system, because that is actually the worst part about all this, because the American people have completely lost faith in the DOJ, the FBI, these different agencies. And so they're wanting to restore public trust in the justice system, which is very, very important.
We have a press conference coming up with Adams in the next 7 minutes. We're gonna come on. We were gonna talk about this regardless if Adams was going to speak today. So it's good to hear what Adams has to say. In the meantime, we have a clip. Chris Cuomo, News Nation, talks to Geraldo and another legal analyst about this situation. It's about 5 minutes. We'll play that right now and get their perspective.
Former New York City prosecutor Paul Callan and News Nation correspondent at large Geraldo Rivera. Let's do law and then politics, because both of you can speak to both. It's good to have you both. Thank you, brothers. Thank you for doing it on short notice. Paul, legally, does this mean what I think, which is leave him alone for now? We'll look at it again after the election.
Well, that's what they're trying to get away with, but this is completely bizarre. I've never seen something like this attempted in a federal court. Now, bear in mind, the assistant U.S. attorneys in the Southern District have to agree to go along with this. And they have the right to resign from office. Remember the Saturday night massacre that happened during the Nixon administration when they said in good conscience, I can't do something like that? You may have a Saturday night massacre here where none of these assistants are willing to go into court and move for dismissal. You then have to appear in front of a federal judge. And by the way, it happens to be a federal judge who was selected by Mr. Trump, which probably helps his position. However, federal judges are very independent. And this federal judge who's had the case is going to say, why in the world are you walking away from this case? And if you want to do this, you have the right to pardon the mayor. You don't have to have the court and the current Southern District agree to your conditions. And there are bizarre conditions listed in the letter that was sent.
But why would the judge fight it? If the prosecutor doesn't want to bring the case, or they're saying, we've been told not to bring this case in the interest of justice, what is the judge's, what's the judge's motivation or upside?
Well, Chris, in state court, a judge would really not get involved at this level. But federal courts are different. When you settle a federal case, the federal judge has to agree to the settlement. He also has to agree to the dismissal. However, in the end, someone's got to prosecute the case. And if the prosecutors are refusing to present evidence, the defendant wins. So the federal judge is going to stall it if he wants to. But in the end, he won't be able to stop it. So you are correct about that.
All right, so let's talk about the politics, because that's what this is really about. Obviously, this letter was drafted by somebody other than Trump. Geraldo. We both know how he speaks and how he writes. So they're trying to do what he wants here. And it comes at the same time that Adams, there's a story moving now in a New York tabloid that Adams has been telling officials under his power to not openly criticize Trump. I don't know why he would say that out loud, knowing that they were going to rat on him about it. But what do you think the political play is here for Trump and the plus minus for Adams?
Well, for Trump, it shows that yet again his influence is undeniable and so formidable that you can't stand up to it. And it was pretty clear that President Trump wanted Eric Adams to be free and clear of these charges. But I think that two quick things. One is that the case against Mayor Adams, in my opinion, was a lame case. It stunk to high heaven to me. I was shocked that Damian Williams and the Southern District brought this prosecution for upgrades on Turkish Airlines. I mean, I've been upgraded by are they going to come and arrest me now? When someone comes, Geraldo, come from coach and sit up front. We got an empty seat. Come on, mayor of the greatest city of in the world, you're sitting in coach, come sit up front. They're going to give you an upgrade. That's a felony now? And to try and draw a quid between that and building the Turkish consulate, doesn't Turkey get to have a consulate near the United Nations? I think that that is preposterous, and I think that in Adams' case, maybe he played it, and I think the voters of New York can judge whether he played the immigration issue as his trump card to get this pass from the president. I don't know about that, but I am absolutely delighted. Even though I am myself conflicted because I like Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, who is the most formidable challenger against Eric Adams in the Democratic primary. I like both these men very much. I go back years with Mayor Adams when he was a cop. Of course, Andrew Cuomo was a terrific governor of New York State. I can't tell you how many cop funerals I've been to with Governor Cuomo. I think that what you have here is all kinds of politics bubbling up, but this is a case I'm glad let Eric Adams be Eric Adams.
Hey, thanks for watching.
Let Eric Adams be Eric Adams. We'll place Eric Adams back in the right side of the screen. A couple minutes, folks, and we will hear from Adams. It is scheduled for 12 p.m. Eastern. Interesting. It'll be interesting. You know, we're hearing that, hey, it's based off Adams' behavior, and, you know, after this re-election, you know, he could be charged again. I don't think he's going to be recharged, but it will be interesting to even see if he does get reelected, because there's other people that are running against him, possibly even Cuomo, the former governor of New York, was talking about possibly getting in the mix. But it seems like Adams is going to definitely be playing ball with the Trump administration when it comes to the mass deportations, or defying the city council of New York and, you know, implementing his own ways to work with the Trump administration in getting people deported that the Trump administration, you know, wants out of New York City. I think this was definitely quid pro quo. But hey, you know, they're working together, and, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump and Adams start campaigning together with rallies in New York.
Yeah, I wanted to say something though on the clip we played, the Cuomo clip. I forgot the guy's name, the first guy that spoke, not Geraldo, the other one. He's sitting there saying he thinks that all these staffers at the SDNY are going to quit and protest, and he's comparing it to the Nixon and the Saturday Night Massacre when they all protest or whatever. I mean, I don't see that happening here at all. I think he's living on another planet, or if that's what he thinks, because in reality, what's going to happen, and we have plenty of evidence to show, what will happen with the Trump DOJ, they're not going to stop at just dismissing this case. More than likely, they're going to go after people who actively participated in the targeting of Eric Adams for political reasons. And we've seen that already with Trump's cases. Like look at what's happened with Letitia James and Alvin Bragg and these different people that brought these cases that they feel were politically motivated. So I would expect the same here. And so as far as the staffers go at SDNY, whichever ones worked on the case, I think they're going to be keeping their heads down, hoping they don't get investigated for politically targeting Eric Adams.
Good point, Magnolia. Interesting take. Yes. Some of the prosecutors.
I can promise you there's emails, there's evidence that exists that proves they targeted him for political reasons. I promise you there's emails and probably text messages proving that this was politically targeted. So they're probably deleting things, covering things up. That's probably what's really happening. I don't see people resigning in protest or anything like that. I think it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, we're waiting for this press conference to start. I want to hear what he has to say. I don't know how long he'll be speaking. Yeah, his hurdle is to be reelected. I mean, he has to, he's facing, I'm looking here, there's a lot of primary candidates. Michael Blake, Brad Lander, Zeller Myrie, Jessica Ramos, Scott Stringer, Whitney Tilson. These are individuals that plan to run against him to try to be the Democratic nominee for the mayor. And I guess the primary's in a few months. But I would think that the mayor here, now that this is going to be dropped, and maybe he'll use that as fuel and say it is the weaponization of law and the DOJ, and it could happen to any one of you. And I've been, subject to that. Maybe that can resonate with the voters, kind of how, one of the platforms that Trump was using to get elected himself, with the migrant, the southern border, but also the weaponization of law enforcement, lawfare.
Mm-hmm.
And, and a lot of people out there are starting to say lawfare, the DOJ's, going after other political opponents. And, these are witch hunts. And, that incites a lot of the voters. We'll see if it happens in New York. New York is known as a sanctuary city. It has sanctuary city policies on its books. I believe the mayor has indicated that he's going to find ways to get around that, to kind of work with, ICE. And now that, I've always said that the Trump administration has a Trump card over Adams. They have Adams. You play ball with us, you comply with us, and we'll get rid of this case. We'll make this case go away. Well,
I think the reality here is a bit more grim for Eric Adams. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the case itself, when he was charged, and some of his staff was as well raided and things like that, that did this case has done enormous harm to Eric Adams. And, whether he was guilty or not is sort of beside the point now, because just the fact that a case was brought against him and he faced corruption charges publicly in the court of public opinion, that caused extraordinary harm to him. Because you have people, even in our chat, I see people constantly saying Eric Adams is corrupt. Eric Adams is corrupt. People say that, and you hear New Yorkers saying it. And why are they saying that? Well, they're saying it because he was charged with political corruption. He was charged with taking bribes. He was charged with these things. They made a very public display of charging him. They didn't just bring the case against him. They made a big public display of it, which was one thing the Trump DOJ letter pointed to, was the fact that they made this so public and therefore potentially poison the jury pool, things like that. And so the public perception is I think Eric Adams has an uphill battle to climb. I think, I don't know what he does here. If I were him and I was innocent of these charges, I would probably sue them for the harm that they did, because you can't even put a price on the harm that they've done to him, because he's always had a good reputation in New York. He's a New Yorker through and through. He was a police officer decades ago. He came up under Giuliani. He's a law and order type of guy. He loves the city and all those things, but I think that it really has caused a lot of harm for him, and I wonder how he'll do in the re-election because of it. So, it's good that the case is dismissed, but in my opinion, the harm to him has been significant. And so the other issue is you have the media talking about this as if, Trump is doing some kind of favor for him. Just to get him to help with immigration. And that's the way it's being presented. They're not presenting really the facts here. So that's going to be difficult for him to overcome. I feel also the fact that, crime and everything like that is down in New York for the most part. But the other problem with that is people don't feel that the crime is down. So he's already facing a problem with public perception, and his police chief, Jessica Tisch, has talked about that too. They can say all day, they can show these charts about the crime going down and the statistics and different things. But when people see a woman getting burned alive on a subway, that's what the people see. They don't see that and go, oh, wow, New York is getting safer. Oh, wow, crime is really going down. No, they say, what is going on in New York? How are people being burned alive on the subway? And so they have this problem already with public perception. Public perception thinks he's corrupt, thinks he's not doing anything, thinks he's ruining the city. And so I think that's really the battle he has to face between now and re-election. He's going to have to somehow get his truth out there. Maybe that's why he's doing this press conference today. Hopefully it gets going here, but I'll be interested to see if Alex Spiro will be up there with him. Because, he likes to talk.
Well, Magnolia, I'm looking at these other candidates. I can't see any of them beating him. I mean, I'm sure Eric Adams is backed by the NYPD unions, the police unions, as him being a former law enforcement officer himself. I just can't see how these other candidates, they look. Personally, they have really no name recognition, none of them, to overtake this guy. I really don't think so. Though, if he was actually indicted, facing indictment, that could really sit with people. But I think if they hone the message on that this was weaponization by the DOJ and he was a victim to it, I don't think it's going to bother the voters. I really don't. And overall, I do think, besides, city council with their sanctuary law policies that they're saying that they're going to uphold, I think majority of the citizens in New York are okay with the mayor's plans, the mayor's vision of deporting criminal migrants, because I can't see how anyone cannot want migrants deported. And I think the migrant issue is a major issue in New York. Obviously, they have a budget issue too. They need money, and all that money that was wasted, with the housing the migrants and giving them shelters and whatnot. But I just think the money and the migrant issue is a big issue in New York City. There was other controversies with the congestion tax and whatnot, but overall, New York, they've said in their State of the Union that they had last month that crime was down. Crime was down. So if they can show numbers and say, hey, crime's down, even though they got these a lot of isolated incidents that have been amplified to make it look like, oh, well, the subway system is out of control. I do think it's out of control. People are going to say crime is down, migrants are being deported, this is a vision. I think a lot of people would get on board with that, personally.
Yeah, I think some people will, people were very upset. A lot of the New Yorkers were very angry about the amount of money being spent on migrants. That was pretty consistent across the board. I think most New Yorkers were outraged by that. The debit cards that they were getting, the enormous amount of money spent on feeding them. Because, when the migrant crisis started and Greg Abbott started sending those buses to New York, the crisis was quite literally dropped in their laps. And so they had thousands of migrants coming in every week, and they had to stand up these programs. And it was a ton of money. He said they spent over $6 billion, and they were using school buses. Remember the outrage in New York? I think it was may have been Long Island was one of the ones we saw where they had basically commandeered the public school buses for migrants. And so parents were flipping out because their kids weren't able to ride the bus, which is something they pay taxes for. So, people were seeing all of the things that they pay taxes for. It was all just going to the migrants. Eric Adams also talked about with Tucker Carlson the long-term impact, because what he said was, it wasn't just the fact that, they're having this like open border policy. It was on top of it, the Biden administration was just expecting New York to take these thousands of people and not reimbursing them for any of it. They barely got any money from the federal government for this. Oh, here we go.
All right, let's drop his photo on the right. Volume.
Justice has directed that the case against me be dismissed, finally ending a months-long saga that put me, my family, and this city through an unnecessary ordeal. As I said from the outset, I never broke the law, and I never would. I would never put any personal benefit above my solemn responsibility as your mayor. It is worth repeating the facts because many sensational and false claims have been made. So let me be clear. I never ask anyone to break the law on my behalf or on behalf of my campaign. Never. And I absolutely never traded my power as an elected official for any personal benefit. No witness ever came forward publicly to make claims against me. None of the baseless threats from prosecutors of new charges and new evidence ever materialized. And this case will no longer continue. Psalms 34:1 says, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. So I thank the Justice Department for its honesty. Now we can put this cruel episode behind us and focus entirely on the future of our city. It's time to move forward. But despite the fact that I am no longer facing legal questions, I also understand that many New Yorkers will still question my character. And I know that I must continue to regain your trust. I've learned a lot over the last year, and this experience has been humbling. But as we have been dragged through this unfortunate prosecution, I never took my eyes off what was important, you and your family's future. And because of that, our city government has never been stronger. Just look at the figures. We have achieved record drops in crime, record increases in affordable housing, and the highest number of jobs in New York City history. And I want to repeat that. Double-digit drops in shootings, homicides, and subway crimes. the most new housing built in a 3-year period ever, and the most jobs ever. We moved more than 185,000 migrants through our system and out of our care. We helped put $30 billion back into the pockets of New Yorkers through direct assistance. And we enrolled more children than ever into early childhood education programs while reducing the cost of childcare to less than 1/10 of what it was when we came into office for working families. We put thousands of new police officers on our streets and in our subways. And we connected thousands struggling with mental illness to services. That's right. Hidden beneath all the shocking headlines, full of rumors and accusations, all the innuendos and insinuations, the real news is that the women and men of my administration have delivered for the working people of New York, just like I promised we would. Those are the facts. Many people continue to feed whatever false narratives they want, but no one can dispute the numbers. Continue to improve those numbers even more month after month, and dedicating myself to the values and fights that New Yorkers believe in is how I will restore the faith in those who have lost it in me. And it would be how I reward the faith of those who believed in me for 4 years ago. Giving hope again to all New Yorkers who want to see their city thrive. If you want to know who I am, all you have to know about me is where I am from. Who I am is not in the headlines. It is in my history. It's the same place as you, working class, struggling to survive, in love with this city, even when it lets us down. I grew up in a place where justice always seemed out of reach. My family was betrayed by a city that didn't care enough about us. And that's why I fought for you and will keep fighting for you, because I am you. And that is why you can trust me to keep moving this city forward. This has been the most difficult 15 months of my life, but my inspiration was knowing I was fighting for the people of this city. So many of those people are still facing their own difficult challenges every day, just like my own mother did when she worked 3 jobs to raise 6 children. If you work hard enough, New York City should give you a chance to succeed. This is our great promise. This is my promise to you. Hard work, real results. In a city, and a mayor you can be proud of. Thank you, New York.
Well, no questions? No questions. So
Yeah, and there was also no Alex Spiro. He did it.
Yeah, are you there, Magnolia?
Yeah.
We'll put Mayor back up on the right. So basically, he's saying moving forward, he's claiming he didn't do anything wrong. Put this behind, and he's talking about his vision and plans for New York.
Yeah, but he also said he understands basically what I said before. Right before he went on, I said that even though the case is dismissed, in the eyes of the public, people will still question him. And that's what he said when he did his speech just now. He said, I understand that there will be people who still doubt my character. And so he acknowledged that he has some ground to make up there, overcoming this bad public perception and the charges that were so publicly thrown at him.
So we played CNN, we played Fox. One more clip we're going to share. It's put the MSNBC perspective. You want to throw that up?
Yeah.
All right.
While the Department of Justice is ordering federal prosecutors to drop corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. The order from acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove would dismiss all charges against Mayor Adams without prejudice, meaning they could be refiled in the future. Adams was charged with one count of conspiracy to receive campaign contributions from foreign nationals and to commit wire fraud and bribery, 2 counts of soliciting campaign contributions from foreign nationals, and 1 count of soliciting and accepting a bribe. NBC reports in a memo, Bove argued that the indictment of Adams in September came too close to this year's mayoral primary in June, and that it limited Adams' ability to aid President Donald Trump's crackdown on immigrants and to fight crime. Bove, without citing specific evidence, also suggested the charges were politically motivated. It cannot be ignored that Mayor Adams criticized the prior administration's immigration policies before the charges were filed, he wrote. Bove said Adams' case would be reviewed by a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, but not until after the general election for mayor in November. Important to note, the charges against the mayor have not yet been officially dismissed. For that to happen, a formal request will need to be filed in court and reviewed by a judge. Mayor Adams' lawyer responded to the dismissal order in a statement that reads in part, "The facts of the case are clear. The mayor never used his official position for personal benefit, nor did he have any role in violating campaign finance laws. Despite a lot of fanfare and sensational claims, ultimately there was no evidence presented that he broke any laws ever." End quote. And here are the front pages of the New York tabloids this morning. New York Daily News simply saying off the hook. And remember, this involved the nation of Turkey, so quit cold turkey. So Ken Delaney, we should also add to this conversation that Eric Adams has courted Donald Trump very hard to get to this day. He went down just days before the inauguration to Mar-a-Lago. He raced down to the inauguration itself. He has met many times with Donald Trump, priming the pump for this moment, and now he's off the hook for now.
Yeah, and it's easy to make light of this, Willie, but I got to tell you, I feel like a broken record, but it's hard to overstate what an earthquake of a story this is in Justice Department circles, because you just don't see this. They explicitly said they were not dropping the case because of the facts or the law, that it was no reflection on the legal theories or the work of the career prosecutors who brought the case. And so what was their grounds? Well, it was charges without evidence that the U.S. attorney who had been appointed by President Biden was using the case to burnish his image, and also some concerns that the trial would take place during the New York primary season, even though the indictment was brought 9 months before the New York primary. So look, I mean, what this is starting to look like is a political decision to drop charges against someone who, as you said, has been courting Donald Trump and the Trump administration, and who has claimed that he was persecuted by the Biden administration because of his stance on immigration. And they even said, actually, in their justification, that another issue they were concerned about was that he had lost his security clearance because he was under this criminal cloud and therefore couldn't cooperate with federal authorities in immigration enforcement. So, look, this is not done. I mean, it's creating the impression that there's a Biden Justice Department and a Trump Justice Department, and these decisions are made for political reasons. The Southern District of New York is full of career prosecutors who are apolitical, and they brought this case based on the facts and the law. There's a mountain of evidence, much of which they revealed in a speaking indictment that accuses Eric Adams of soliciting bribes and favors from the government of Turkey, and then in turn doing the government of Turkey favors using his official position, including getting the approval for a building that the fire department said was unsafe to occupy in New York City. And so here you have a situation where the main justice is ordering the Southern District to drop this case. It hasn't been dropped yet, but then saying that it's being done without prejudice, meaning the charges could be refiled at any time. Well, what position does that leave Mayor Eric Adams in? He is now beholden to the Trump Justice Department. Those charges are hanging over him. So this is a really, really extraordinary situation, guys.
Danny, another case, Mayor Adams knowing what a lot of people know, that flattery will get you everywhere with Donald Trump. Go down, flatter him, court him, support his policies, and you'll get what you want out of the deal. But how disheartening is this for prosecutors building cases, as we could say about all the January 6th prosecutors as well?
Yeah, the memo itself says, well, this has nothing to do with the line prosecutors who worked on these cases. It's more about management. But that's got to be a hollow compliment to the line prosecutors who worked on the case. Because when you do, you live that case. And there's a difference between the line prosecutors and the appointed positions. But I got to tell you, Willie, never in the history of memos have there been so much in the way of subtext between the lines. It's 2 pages, and there's so much in there. Among them, the smarter thing for the administration might have been to just make this memo 3 lines. Dismiss the case against Mayor Adams. It's the explanation that's going to subject them to a ton of criticism. And if anyone else is concerned that this is a quid pro quo between Eric Adams in exchange for him helping with immigration enforcement and dismissing the case, that's not me saying it. The memo itself worries about that in a footnote, saying that is not what this is, we promise you. But critics are going to say that's exactly what this seems like. And the magic word that you seized on, Willie, is the word without. Without prejudice does mean, and the memo says, that they could bring these charges again, which normally wouldn't have that much meaning. But in this case, because they also mention the things that they want Eric Adams to help the administration with, the implication is going to draw a lot of criticism. Again, my recommendation would have been make this 3 lines, dismiss the case. It's the explanation that's going to get him in trouble.
NBC News and MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos and NBC News justice correspondent Ken Delanian, thank you both very much for your reporting and analysis.
All right, so we listened to 3 major news networks' perspective on this case. Prosecutors requesting that the case be dismissed. It hasn't formally been dismissed yet, though I think it will. I don't see this as a judge going rogue or, maybe the Southern District of New York, possibly prosecutors act funny. I don't think so. Your take, Magnolia.
Yeah, I think they kind of said a lot of what other people have said, but whether or not they're, that's what people are going to say is that, Trump's DOJ is only doing this because they want Adams to help with immigration, which they did acknowledge in the letter that that they think that this case would hinder his ability to do that. But they also said that they believe this is an example of weaponization of the justice system that they want to be ended.
Political analyst weighs in on latest with New York City Mayor Adams. Fox 5 report. Let's see what they have to say.
To dismiss the bribery case against the mayor could be filed as soon as today. The mayor's legal battle isn't over just yet.
But the question is, will it be resolved ahead of the mayoral election in November? With us this morning, political analyst Hank Shankoff. Always nice to have you here and get your insight.
Thank you very much.
So let me ask you something. Is it over because the U.S. Attorney's Office has always been like a sovereign state, very high and mighty, seemed you couldn't corrupt them in any particular way? Is it possible they're going to say, no, we don't want to deal with the DOJ, we're going to continue with the case?
It's hard to imagine how they do that. The U.S. Attorney's Office of the Southern District is historically the kind of most extraordinary place where anything can happen, where the U.S. Attorney is in charge. Here's a case where the Justice Department can say, look, we reviewed the evidence, which they've already said. We've reviewed the facts of the case. We don't think it's worth prosecuting because it's a bad case. And many people in the legal community here in New York have said that already. So they're not on, there's not that sense that things are completely out of order.
Can we talk about the case a second? Because when it first happened, we were all like, he asked for an upgrade. Somebody called him to get the fire department to go in there and check out a building. I mean, it didn't seem like it was the end all of all, but it did have to do with federal corruption as far as getting on the ballot, money, that kind of thing.
It was a miss.
What was the big point on that?
The big point, let's talk about what came across to people, is that he was getting something for nothing because of his public office. But it doesn't necessarily wash out that way. And everything else that's going on somehow feeds on it. Whenever there's a corruption allegation, and there's a high public official, including the mayor, right, the allegations tend to increase exponentially. So Here's a case where the mayor probably didn't get the beating he deserved. He shouldn't have been beaten up the way he was for what happened. It was a bad case. So what happens next? Well, are there other things in the administration that occur? Who knows? The mayor ultimately stands and falls by himself.
And a broader picture, it's been pretty well documented. The mayor has been very friendly with the Trump administration, the inauguration, the prayer breakfast most recently, and now we have this, that the DOJ is asking to take away these charges. A lot of people are saying these things are clearly linked, that the mayor was hoping that this would happen by being nice to the president, and all of a sudden we have this. I mean, that's the public perception here, isn't it?
If the mayor is not rejoicing today, there's something wrong with him, and he certainly is, and he ought to be, okay? Is there a relationship between the mayor and the president? Any mayor of the city of New York who does not have a good relationship with the president of the United States is an imbecile. Why? Because you need the president, because if something happens, you're in trouble. This is the capital of the world, for as far as we're concerned. This is the terrorist target of the world, number one. You need the president. That being said, does this portend something else? Adams has always been down the middle. He's never been a lefty. He's fought with the lefties. Does it make him a Trumpite? Not necessarily. But will it be better for the city that he has this kind of relationship? Probably.
And, of course, the mayor has been criticized by some on the left for his approach to the immigration raids, by what he has directed staff to do. Is there now an expectation that the mayor continue down this road and kind of do what the Trump administration is hoping he'll do?
Well, he's not doing exactly what the Trump administration would like him to do. He's not saying to ICE guys, let's go into schools and grab everybody up. That's not what's happening. He's telling people to make reasonable decisions at schools and other locales. But the left will never forgive him, and the left will never let him alone. And the truth will be that he's got a very short period of time now to prove that he's the mayor. Now, this is off his back. Now he's got to say, okay, I pray there's no more shootings in the subway. I pray there's no more chaos in the street. I pray there's no assaults on people on the Upper East Side where everybody will lose their minds. But he benefits because large elements of the black community may say, frankly, this was a bad deal that was hoisted upon this guy who didn't deserve it. We're going back to where we belong.
Well, as you know, the number of people have already put their bid in for for mayor of New York City. The one person who hasn't yet, but everybody is guessing he's going to do that, is Andrew Cuomo. Does Andrew Cuomo jump in the race now that the mayor has been cleared?
Hard decision for him to make, but Andrew Cuomo has a very good story to tell. People will attack him, will say, look, I'm Andrew Cuomo. I built 2 airports. I got the 2nd Avenue subway opened, built the bridge, delivered 11 on-time budgets. And when people criticize me, Andrew Cuomo says I put 750 MTA cops in the subway. All good news. That's a great story to tell. The problem now is it a good enough story to get past the good news that Adams just got?
So it's not over for Adams, right? I mean, if the Southern District says, okay, we're dropping the charges, they could have the possibility to bring charges at another time.
Could they re-indict? I guess our lawyer friends would say probably so. Is it likely? No. Is there another case there? Who knows?
And, I mean, as we sort of look at this from a grand perspective, the mayor's case was the focal point, but within the administration, there were a lot of different spin-offs, whether it was the Jeffrey Maddrey resignation or the resignation of the education commissioner. Where do those cases now stand after this result here?
Well, the good news, and it's a very important question, yes, the good news is that the mayor can walk and smile today very well. The bad news for the people that are implicated in other things is if they don't get indicted, so what? If they do get indicted, people say, the mayor didn't manage well. But the good news for him is, so what? People judge the mayor by the mayor, and this guy has a particular style and a particular way of doing things that separates him from the chaos around him. And that's probably what will happen. Can he be reelected? The answer is today he can get reelected. Next week, if there's chaos in the streets, he's going to get blamed for it. Simple.
All right, the public advocate probably a little upset this morning, huh? He had the suit already dry cleaned and everything?
Yeah, you know, he's got to stay where he is and do nothing for another 4 years.
Hank Shankoff, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming.
All right. Political ramifications for this. I say he gets reelected.
Well, I mean, that woman on that reporter on the desk, for some reason, she seems desperate for Adams to have legal problems. She kept asking the same question over and over. She's like, well, yeah, but it's not over for him, is it? It's not over. What else could he be facing? You know, it was like she was desperate for him to be in some sort of trouble. Kind of bizarre. She also made a snide remark about his suit. So they seem a little biased there on that panel, but Yeah, I mean, I think it's what we talked about. He's got a problem with public perception. That is an understatement. And if he can overcome that, then he certainly can be reelected, as long as, he keeps doing what he says he's going to do. He keeps, he works with ICE. He does what he's going around claiming that he'll do. And as long as, like that analyst said, as long as there's not something crazy that pops off in New York that he gets blamed for, then yeah, he could certainly be reelected.
The comptroller who is responsible for the accounting and financing in New York is calling for him to resign, though.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. People were already calling for him to be resigned throughout this case. Since the case first dropped on him, people have been calling for him to resign. I don't see Eric Adams ever resigning for any reason, just because, we've covered him for so long. He doesn't strike me as a quitter or someone who would give up under any circumstance. So
I personally think the Trump administration has something over his head, basically saying you're going to keep doing what you're doing, calling out, the migrants. If you don't, we'll bring charges back. Dismissed without prejudice means case could be refiled. Though usually, with dismissed with prejudice, when you get a case dismissed with prejudice, obviously you can't bring charges back, but dismissed without prejudice gives the prosecution discretion to bring charges back. Usually without prejudice, they still don't bring the charges back, but technically they can still bring charges back on Adams if they feel. And who knows, what about if Adams starts talking crap against the Trump administration or saying that he doesn't like him or whatever like that? Would they bring charges back on him? So my point is, there's a little leverage here, Magnolia.
Well, I don't think that, first of all, the case we're talking about today is the charges about the flight upgrades and the Turkish embassy there in New York. I don't think that those charges held any water. I don't think they were going to be able to really prove that. What I do think could be a problem, like you said, if things go sideways between Eric Adams and the Trump administration, there is one major thing that I think could be a problem for Eric. We've talked about this in the past, and that is the contracts that were signed, the programs that were erected overnight to accommodate the thousands of migrants. Because of the crisis, because of the way it was so overwhelming, he said for a while the numbers were, they were getting 8,000 a week consistently. That's over 30,000 a month they were getting in. And so because that happened and it actually escalated so quickly, they set up these programs that we mentioned previously. One of the biggest ones I think could be an issue is .go. That is the one I think could be a problem for them, because .go has all of these contracts with different cities. It's not just New York. They have contracts in like Michigan, different states where they provide services. But what happens is they come in and .go has been in New York for a while. They actually had contracts with the city during COVID, where they were doing like mobile COVID testing and things like that. So they've been in the city for a while. And so when the migrant crisis really popped off, the way I saw it happening is they launched this program with .go practically overnight and just gave them the contract. And it was a ton of money. And most of it went to waste, because a lot of that money went to these meals that they were supposed to be providing the migrants. And the meals themselves, what was the cost? Wasn't it like $33 a meal? and they were doing it 3 meals a day for each migrant, and just an enormous amount of money spent on that program. And then the meals went to waste because the migrants didn't like the food. So that's one I can see maybe being a problem. And then there will be many other contracts they will have signed with nonprofits around the city to offer services to migrants. So that's where I think he could have an issue in the future. I don't think the charges we're talking about today, I don't think that they have enough merit to be brought back. I don't think this case, as we saw it, will ever come back. I think if there's any problems down the road, it'll be because of other things that happened during the migrant crisis and the way he handled it.
Let's listen to the comptroller calling for his resignation. This clip here.
Outrageous miscarriage of justice. The Southern District has a tremendous history for doing corruption prosecution. And this says, no, we want you to do corruption. Instead, they had a strong case. They're not even saying the evidence in the case isn't strong. They know he took illegal campaign contributions, corrupted the buildings department, but they just want to wreck the justice system. And unfortunately, New Yorkers are going to pay the consequences.
Do you think that the mayor should resign? There's this swirl now about should he be pardoned, should he not have these charges brought against him? Should he step down given what's happened here?
Yes, he should resign. He's effectively being extorted by the Justice Department. He's only looking out for the interests of one New Yorker, and that's himself, not even speaking up when they come to take our lunch money.
There are many layers to this. It's a two-page memo, I should say. The acting deputy attorney general is an alumnus of this office, of the SDNY, which makes us even more astonishing. But there's a line, a footnote buried in it, which I flagged on Twitter and all the other platforms last night, and it's I just find it to be like an astonishing footnote. Quote, your office correctly noted in a February 3rd, 2025 memorandum, quote, as Mr. Bove, Emil Bove, the acting deputy attorney general, clearly stated to defense counsel during our meeting on January 31st, 2025, the government is not offering to exchange dismissal of a criminal case for Adams's assistance on immigration enforcement. A lot of absurdity baked in there and just the way that that's constructed. But this is something that you've honed in on in recent days. That is, was there some sort of deal brokered between the mayor and the president in Mar-a-Lago or elsewhere?
It sure looks like it. Elsewhere in the memo, it says we're doing this so that the mayor can get back to the business of fighting, quote unquote, illegal immigration. His job is to protect New Yorkers, not to do the president's bidding.
Do you agree, is David Guro's more up to speed on this than I am, and of course, Mr. Landers, so are you, that the way the language is formed, there's a threat to the mayor if you don't do what we say, we're going to bring those charges back?
Dismissed without prejudice means we will be watching every step of the way. And if we're dissatisfied with your fealty to the Trump White House, we'll bring the charges back.
The difference is Landers studied this at Chicago. I got it from Perry Mason. That's the difference.
I can't help but draw a line to what now former President Biden did in the final days of his administration, making these preemptive pardons to his son and others. Look, President Trump could have done the same thing, but there is a flex, a power move here in doing this. You talked about the longstanding independence and proud independence of the SDNY. He's testing them effectively by doing this.
I mean, move fast and break things. He's breaking the Justice Department and the tradition of independent prosecution that the Southern District of New York has long had, and that'll mean more corruption.
You say he should resign. There's another means of recourse here if he doesn't do that. You, other Democrats, could go to the governor of the state of New York, go to Kathy Hochul and say, look, you have the power to get him to step aside, perhaps force him to step aside. Is that something that you and your fellow Democrats are thinking about and indeed would consider at this moment because of all of this?
I mean, the form of removal I'm focused on right now is the ballot box. New Yorkers can get rid of Eric Adams and restore integrity and effective government to City Hall. I mean, people are fed up not just with his corruption, but with his failure to deliver. People are fed up with Democratic mayors of big blue cities who can't govern, and that's what we can elect this year.
Dude, he's so adamant about calling Adams corrupt.
So he's an example of what I mentioned earlier about a hostile city council, hostile city leaders. They've constantly been pushing back on Eric Adams because they don't want to get rid of sanctuary policies. For whatever reason, they are hell-bent on not working with ICE. That is not what they want to do. They do not want to work with ICE. They have gone to the ends of the earth to protect those sanctuary policies and to prevent Eric Adams from going around those policies. And so, this is an example. This guy, you saw on his name, he had a D beside his name. People from Eric Adams' own party have been constantly going against him. They don't like he's more, I would say, as far as when it comes to like law and order and things like that, Eric Adams is very conservative on those matters. I mean, he's a police officer himself. He came up under Giuliani as a police officer. He wants law and order. He wants safety and things like that. But, these Democrats here in the city that constantly defend these policies, they're just being drowned out at this point because people are seeing the criminals coming in and out of those New York jails. We saw Jose Ibarra come in and out of New York jails and go down to Georgia and kill Laken Riley. That's what people are seeing happening. And for whatever reason, people like the guy we just heard from, he just doesn't want to participate with ICE. I don't know. I don't get it. Why wouldn't you want these criminals out of the city? It's so bizarre the way that they're clutching onto this issue for dear life. They just won't let it go. I have questions now about the comptroller. I wonder what he has to hide. The comptroller, he's in charge of money and things like that. So maybe he needs to be investigated because he looks to me like he's trying to hide something, and maybe we need to see his devices and see what he's been up to.
Well, I always think anyone that is involved with the money and handling money should be investigated. Yeah. There's also calls right now to audit the IRS. The IRS. That's a whole other topic that we'll probably talk about down the line. Will the IRS be abolished, or will the auditors be audited themselves? Right. Another thing on Adams, I just want to say, we got one more thing we want to discuss. He's set to testify. He's set to testify, I believe, at the beginning of March. 4 of the mayors were requested to go in front of Congress and speak about the migrant issue. It would be Mayor Adams of New York here, Michelle Wu of Boston, Brandon Johnson of Chicago, and Mike Johnston of Denver. These 4 sanctuary city mayors are set to testify, and it seems like out of the 4, Adams is the one that seems like he's most likely going to play ball. I think all of them eventually have no choice to play ball, but Adams, the one out of all the 4 that is like most likely to work with the Trump administration instead of against the Trump administration. But let's play this clip, CBS New York, about he's set to testify about New York City's sanctuary city status.
Now, the Trump administration continuing to crack down on illegal immigration across the country, including here in the tri-state. And with that, the role of sanctuary cities is now being called into question as House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has called on New York City Mayor Eric Adams and the mayors of 3 other cities to testify before Congress, claiming that they're refusing to fully cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. Joining us now to discuss is criminal defense attorney Eric Fadis. Eric, good to have you with us here this morning.
Good to be with you, Chris.
So let's start with the immigration policies and what the Trump administration is actually ordering when it comes to deportations. Just give us a little background on the legal process as a sanctuary city and how the deportations here actually work.
Sure. So generally speaking, what happens is ICE, the immigration authority, becomes aware of someone who's potentially deportable, and they either send it to like the legal route through an immigration court where there's a hearing, or they go through expedited removal, which really just kicks a person out immediately. Sanctuary cities come in where they either cooperate and communicate with ICE, or they do not. So they can really assist in that system, but also frustrate that system depending on those choices.
And it seems like here in New York, there's kind of a, I don't want to say a delicate balance, because I think in most people's eyes, delicate's probably not the right word to use. But Mayor Adams, has cozied up to President Trump. So they are allowing some deportations, but it is a sanctuary city. So there are some protections in place, whether it comes to schools, churches, hospitals, and whatnot. So is that balance really being met here in New York, or is it really more the mayor is kind of calling the shots on this?
I think that balance is really in flux right now based on how things are evolving in the larger immigration picture. Some sanctuary cities are trying to protect, like you said, churches, schools, that kind of thing from immigration authority invasion. But other municipalities are okay with that kind of cooperation. And so that's really an open question going forward.
All right. So the mayor is being called to face the House Oversight Committee, who say they're investigating sanctuary jurisdictions, their impact on public safety, the effectiveness of the federal efforts to enforce immigration law. Does Congress have any real legal say in this, or is this more showmanship?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that the federal government through Congress gets to decide immigration laws and immigration policy. And if there is a local state law or policy that conflicts with that larger federal picture, that state law loses based on the supremacy clause of the Constitution. That being said, states can sort of enact their own policies and procedures and try to sidestep some of these larger federal requirements. So yes and no. The Congress has some say yes and no.
So, and I know we kind of talk about this all the time because this seems to be the confusing part. President Trump has always said from the get-go, this was before he was even elected on the campaign trail, we're going after violent criminals. And I think most agree, yes, deport the violent criminals. We don't want them around here. They're making things tough on everybody. But there's that line that you want to make sure you're not rounding up everyone, the legal immigrants as well, because some are getting caught up on this, and you're finding that the Trump administration even now has to release a lot of people that are rounded up nationwide.
Oh, of course, Chris. I mean, naturally, in any law enforcement action, there are going to be false positives. The authorities might think a person is deportable when they are not. And it's difficult to tell sometimes. If there's a prior removal order that says there was prior violent crimes, that's a little more clear cut. But when we're talking about a person who has just been arrested and accusations are happening, it's not clear cut.
So let me ask you this. The mayor's pretty much been supportive of the president's efforts when it comes to, as I mentioned, dealing with the violent criminal aspect here. He's even met with the borders are, Tom Homan. But let me say, as he faces this line of questioning, what can the mayor expect to be asked in front of Congress now? And I guess to the bigger picture, what kind of role will this hearing play in the lives of illegal immigrants here in New York City? Because again, I think we a lot of times we hear one thing from the mayor, but there's different actions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mayor's cooperation, the timing of it is a bit curious because it's been he's been a lot more supportive since he's been under indictment, perhaps looking for a pardon. That being said, I think he's going to be asked about what are the local policies in terms of cooperating with ICE, in terms of providing information to ICE and detaining individuals so that ICE can come and do their thing. I think the larger picture for immigrants is we're going to get a glimpse into what this could look like over the next 3.5 years or so in New York, and that sort of cooperation between the federal government and local officials.
So it's essentially, I guess it's safe to say it's a fluid situation. I mean, it really is, for lack of a better term. I mean, the goalpost seems to be moving quite a bit. But again, we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see him testify before Congress and actually answer some questions. So, Eric, thank you.
All right. So, yes, he'll be testifying with the 4 other mayors. Let's put Adams up on the right of the screen. Any final thoughts here, Magnolia, on everything that we discussed today? Anything else you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so the hearing is going to be on March 5th, and there were specifically 4 mayors invited. Like you said, they all are from sanctuary cities. Eric Adams, Brandon Johnson of Chicago, Mike Johnson of Denver, and Michelle Wu of Boston. So the one thing that they all have in common is sanctuary city policies. Out of the 4, Eric Adams looks to be the only one who is willing to work with ICE, and he has said that repeatedly. So the purpose of the hearing is essentially for these mayors to be brought in and defend their sanctuary city policies, sing for their supper, so to speak. Because one thing the Trump administration has already said, actually Pam Bondi, her very first order of business when she was sworn in, first thing she did was she said they're going to be going after any sanctuary city leaders who stand in the way of ICE doing their job. So that is something they're looking at. And several of the mayors, at least Brandon Johnson, was very reluctant to accept the invite to go speak before Congress. I think Brandon Johnson's in trouble. I don't see this going well for him. Mike Johnston seems like he's more playing ball than he was initially. He's now conceded that he does want to help get the violent illegal immigrants out of Denver. But, it's going to be really hard for them to come in and defend these policies. One thing I thought was really amusing during the interview with Tucker Carlson, Eric Adams, he's explained his philosophy on sanctuary city policies numerous times. And basically the way he explains it and what he told Tucker, he said, these immigrants that come to the city, they're undocumented, but they're coming here to seek asylum. They're coming here for a better life. They're working. They're taking care of their family. They're paying taxes. This is the key phrase that you'll hear from a lot of these different leaders. They quote, they pay taxes. And he went into detail on that. And what he means by that is these immigrants are going around and they're using, city services. They're going to stores, they're buying things, they're paying sales tax. That's what he means by that. They're paying sales tax. So therefore, they are entitled to city services that taxes are funding. So that's the way he sort of sees it in his mind. And he says, well, if they're paying taxes, quote unquote, then we're going to, allow them to use the services. But Tucker Carlson came back at him and he said, well, you could say that about any criminal. You could say murderers pay sales tax and therefore they should be free. So that doesn't really make any sense. And I could tell Eric was like, oh, okay. Yeah. He kind of stumped him a little bit on that one. But yeah, we'll see what happens with this hearing in a few weeks. It's March 5th. We'll be looking forward to what happens there.
All right. Well, Eric Adams, we'll see. We'll keep monitoring Eric Adams. Appreciate you guys coming on this morning. And if anything else breaks on this case, we will share on JLR Investigates. Thanks for watching, everyone. We will talk soon. Take care.